Zira paced quickly down the narrow corridor of the medical facility, her long, slender fingers clenching the data pad in her hands. The soft hum of the alien ship filled the air, a constant reminder that she was far from home. She was an experienced nurse, calm under pressure, able to handle any patient, no matter how unusual the circumstances. Today, something was different. The humans in the containment chambers had started showing symptoms no one had expected. At first it seemed harmless, just mild headaches and fatigue. But the changes had gotten worse, much worse. Zira glanced at the readouts on the datapad. The human named Marcus, a tall man with dark eyes and brown hair, had shown the first signs of change. It was subtle at first. His breathing seemed deeper. His muscles were slightly more defined. But as the hours passed, the changes became impossible to ignore. His body was transforming right before her eyes. Zira had been assigned to monitor Marcus and the others after they were exposed to a strange substance, an experimental compound designed by the alien scientists. It was supposed to be a breakthrough in healing, something that could revolutionize medicine across the galaxy. But, as Zira had quickly learned, it was far from perfect. She rushed to the containment chamber where Marcus was held, the sliding doors parting with a soft hiss. Inside, Marcus was lying on a medical bed, his eyes closed, his body twitching occasionally. Zira could see it now. His skin, once smooth and pale, was beginning to glow faintly, like the soft light of a distant star. His muscles seemed to swell, becoming larger with every passing minute. It wasn't just his appearance, it was his energy. It was radiating power. She moved closer, her heart beginning to race. "Marcus," she whispered, touching his arm gently. He didn't respond. At first his eyes still closed, his body tensing and relaxing in a strange rhythm. "Marcus," she said louder, her voice tinged with worry. "Can you hear me?" Slowly his eyes opened. The human's dark brown eyes were no longer their usual color. They were now a deep violet, glowing faintly. He blinked a few times, confusion clouding his features. "Zira," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "What's happening to me?" Zira stepped back, her hands trembling. This wasn't just some side effect. Something far more serious was going on. She had seen enough medical data to know that this wasn't a typical reaction to the compound. The glowing skin, the unnatural strength, the sharpness in his eyes, it was as though he was becoming something else entirely. "I need to get help," Zira said quickly. She turned to leave, but paused. Something stopped her. Marcus's face held an expression of fear not just for himself but for everyone around him. "Please," he said, his voice quieter now. "Tell me I'm not going to die." Zira hesitated. She had never seen anything like this before. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she couldn't tell him that. "Not yet. No, Marcus," she said, trying to calm herself. "We'll figure this out. Just stay calm." Her mind raced as she left the containment chamber, the doors closing behind her. She hurried down the hallway toward the control room, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how little she knew. The substance was supposed to heal injuries, not cause strange transformations. And yet, here was Marcus, changing before her very eyes. Inside the control room, the alien staff was busy analyzing the data from the humans, but no one seemed to notice the gravity of the situation. Zira quickly approached the head scientist, an older alien named Talon, whose sharp features and silver skin made him seem as though he were always studying something in a lab. "Zira, what is it?" Talon asked, not looking up from his datapad. "It's Marcus," she said, her voice urgent. "The changes are progressing faster than we anticipated. He's glowing, Talon. His muscles are growing. His mind is ... sharper. He's stronger than any human I've ever seen." Talon raised an eyebrow, but his expression remained neutral. "Oh, we knew there could be some side effects. We've had some abnormal reactions in the past, but nothing to suggest, nothing like this," Zira interrupted. "This isn't just a side effect. He's changing, evolving. This compound is doing something to him. It's affecting him on a genetic level." Talon finally looked up, his pale eyes narrowing. You're overreacting, Zira. The human body is resilient, might be adapting. This isn't new territory. We've seen this in our experiments before. But enough, Talon snapped. Focus. On your patience, Zira. You're being emotional. It's just a reaction. I'll have my team check on it. Zira stood there for a moment, her thoughts a whirlwind. How could Talon dismiss what she had seen? The changes were happening too fast to ignore. The data didn't lie. Marcus wasn't just experiencing side effects, he was becoming something. More, something beyond human. Is something alien. Zero clenched her fists, frustration bubbling inside her. She had to find answers. For Marcus. For herself. For all of humanity. As she turned to leave, a sudden noise interrupted her thoughts. A loud thud echoed from the direction of Marcus's chamber. She rushed back, her heart pounding in her chest. What now? Inside the room, Marcus was standing, his body taller and more defined than before. He looked at her with his glowing eyes. But this time, there was no confusion in his gaze. Only understanding, and something else, something dangerous. I know what's happening to me, Marcus said in a low voice, his muscles rippling under his skin. And I don't think I can stop. Zira froze, her breath catching in her throat. What had he become? Zira stood frozen in the doorway, staring at Marcus, who was now standing in the center of the medical room. His once lean body had transformed. His muscles were large and defined, his skin glowing with a soft, almost ethereal light. His eyes, still violet, flickered with an intensity she had never seen before. A deep sense of dread settled in Zira's chest as she watched him move, his strength and agility almost unnatural. He was no longer just a human. He was something else, Marcus Zira said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to remain calm. What's happening to you? Marcus glanced at her, his face unreadable. He looked different, but there was a certain clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. His mind, it seemed, was sharper, more focused. I can feel it, Zira, he replied, his voice low and steady. Thought, something's changing inside me. I can feel it in my blood. In my bones. I've never felt so alive. Zira's mind raced. This wasn't a simple side effect. The substance, whatever it was doing something to him, something more than just physical enhancement. She could see it now in the way he moved, in the way he spoke. The compound was altering his entire being, not just his body.
It was his bot.
If his very nature was being rewritten, she took a step closer, careful not to get too close to him. We need to figure out what's happening, she said urgently. This isn't normal. You're changing on a genetic level. Marcus looked down at his hands, clenching and unclenching his fingers. I know, he said, his voice quieter now. I can hear things. I can see better. It's like everything around me is sharper, more intense. It's not just my body, my mind. Is evolving. Zira felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't supposed to happen. The substance was never intended to do this. It was meant to enhance healing, to help in the recovery of injured bodies, not to transform them into something alien. And yet here was Marcus's proof that the substance had done exactly that. Why me? Marcus asked, his voice filled with a mix of confusion and awe. Why am I the one going through this? Why not the others? The other humans had shown symptoms, yes, but nothing as extreme as Marcus's transformation. Could it be that he was reacting differently to the substance? Or was there something unique about him? Before she could respond, a loud beeping noise filled the room. Zira turned toward the medical console, her eyes scanning the data quickly. Her heart sank as she read the readings on the screen. The numbers were off the charts. His heart rate, oxygen levels, brain activity, all were exceeding normal human limits. The changes were accelerating. Marcus's Zira began, but she was interrupted by a sudden sharp pain in her head. She gasped, clutching her temples as the world around her spun. It was as if the very air had thickened, pressing against her mind, clouding her thoughts. She stumbled backward, falling into a nearby chair. Zira. Marcus's voice was filled with concern. She looked up to see him moving toward her, but the room seemed to blur around her. She could feel the pulse of his energy, his presence overwhelming the space around them. It was almost as if his transformation had affected her too. "I'm fine," she muttered, struggling to regain her focus. "It's just, everything is changing so fast. I don't know what to do." "Neither do I," Marcus said quietly, standing at a distance now, giving her space. "But we need answers. I can't control this. It's happening too fast. I feel like I'm losing myself." Zero took a deep breath, pushing through the dizziness. She couldn't afford to lose control. She had to stay focused. Marcus needed her now more than ever. But she couldn't shake the growing sense of panic that settled deep within her. This wasn't just a medical issue anymore. It was a life-changing event. It's for Marcus, for herself, and for humanity. She slowly stood up, steadying herself against the console. "We need to run more tests," she said, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her. "We need to figure out what this substance is really doing. If we can understand it, maybe we can reverse the changes, or at least slow them down." Marcus nodded, though his eyes seemed distant. He was no longer the man she had met days ago. Man who had been quiet, ordinary, and somewhat unsure of himself. The person standing before her now was something else entirely, a new version of humanity. One she didn't fully understand. But as much as she wanted to help him, Zero realized, she was also terrified of the unknown. What if these changes were irreversible? What if Marcus was becoming something no one could control? "Zero," Marcus spoke again, his voice sharp. "You've seen the data. You know this isn't just some drug reaction. This is something far bigger. You said it yourself. My body's changing. But so is my mind. I can feel things I never could before. Not sure if I'm human anymore." Zero swallowed hard. Her heart ached at the fear in his voice. He was right. He wasn't the same. No one who went through this would be the same again. She took a step closer, her hand reaching out instinctively. "I'll help you, Marcus. I swear, I will. We'll find out what's happening. Together." But even as she said the words, she wasn't sure she believed them. What if the truth was too much to handle? What if in trying to save him, she only made things worse? Just then, the door to the control room slid open, and Talon, the senior scientist, stepped in. His silver skin shimmered in the dim light of the room, and his sharp eyes immediately focused on Marcus, his expression unreadable. "You've seen the changes, Zira?" Talon's voice was calm, detached. Zira turned to face him, trying to mask the fear in her voice. "I've seen enough to know that this is beyond us now. This isn't just a side effect, Talon. Marcus is changing. Need to find out why before it's too late." Talon's eyes narrowed. "I've already initiated a full scan of his condition. The results are ... troubling, but there's no need to panic just yet." Zero felt her frustration rise. "Panic? You're telling me not to panic when he's becoming something we can't even understand?" "You have no idea what's happening, Talon. None of us do." Talon stepped forward, his cold eyes studying Marcus. "We'll handle it, Zira. You'll do your job. But don't let your emotions get in the way of science." Zira's hands clenched into fists. She didn't have time for his arrogance now. There was too much at stake. And in that moment, Zira made a silent promise to herself. She wasn't going to let anyone, alien or human, stand in the way of Marcus's future. She would find the truth, no matter the cost. Zira sat quietly in the observation room, her eyes fixed on the data streams flashing across the screens. Marcus had been in the medical facility for 3 days now, and every scan, every test, showed the same result. The changes were progressing rapidly. He wasn't just getting stronger, he was evolving. In every moment that passed, Zira found herself growing more and more connected to him. She hadn't expected this feeling. She had always been professional, focused only on her work. But with Marcus, things were different. He was no longer just a patient. He had become something more to her, something she couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the bond that had formed between them, the quiet conversations in the sterile medical rooms, the moments when their eyes met, filled with unspoken understanding. Zira shook her head, trying to push the thoughts aside. This wasn't the time for feelings. There was still so much they didn't understand about the changes. But as she stared at Marcus through the glass, She couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him. His body was no longer just human, it was something beyond that. His muscles rippled beneath his glowing skin, his eyes gleaming with a newfound strength, and his movements had become almost predatory in their precision. Yet, despite all the changes, there was still something familiar about him. He was still Marcus. She had heard the whispers among the other medical staff. Some were curious, others fearful. There were rumors that what Marcus was becoming might be dangerous, that the substance had triggered something in him that could not be controlled. Zero didn't want to believe that. She had seen Marcus struggle with his own fears about the transformation, but he was still trying to understand. It and Zero had vowed to help him. She walked out of the observation room and down the corridor to the holding cell where Marcus was staying. His room was simple, with soft lighting and a bed that looked too small for the person he was becoming. But he wasn't lying in bed today. Instead, he was standing by the window, looking out at the stars. He hadn't said much since their last conversation, but Zero could sense that something was different now. He was no longer the uncertain man she had met. Now he seemed focused, almost too focused, as if he was constantly fighting something inside himself. "Marcus?" Zero called softly as she entered the room. He turned to face her, his glowing eyes reflecting the soft light from the window. A small, but knowing, smile crossed his lips. "Zero, I was expecting you." Zero stepped closer, her heart racing in her chest. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He paused for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "Stronger, faster, more aware. It's like, I can feel everything all at once. The room, the stars outside, the way my blood moves through my veins. I don't know how to explain it." Zero nodded, understanding more than she let on. "Can't imagine how overwhelming that must be." Marcus chuckled, though it wasn't a sound of amusement. "You can't, but I think I'm starting to understand. Why the others are afraid? I don't think I'm just human anymore." Zero's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus met her gaze, his expression serious now. "I feel like I could do anything, like nothing can stop me. But at the same time, I don't feel completely in control. It's like the power is." "Much." Zero moved closer, her hand resting gently on the railing next to him. "Marcus, we don't know what this will mean in the long run, but I want you to know I'll be here, helping you figure this out. We'll do this together." He looked down at her hand, then back into her eyes. "Thank you, Zero. I don't know what I would have done without you." His words hung in the air between them, filled with a weight that neither of them had expected. Zero's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't realized how much those words would mean to her. But it wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them, the sincerity in his eyes. She felt her heart beat faster, and a rush of warmth spread through her chest. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "we have to be careful. We don't know where this is going. We don't know what will happen if the changes continue." Nodded, but there was something in his eyes that Zero didn't fully understand. "I know, but whatever happens, Zero, I won't go through this alone."
Oh.
Zero felt a swell of emotion in her chest, something that made it hard to breathe. She tried to focus, to remind herself of her duty, but the truth was undeniable. She was becoming attached to him. She couldn't ignore it anymore, but just as she opened her mouth to say something, the door to the room opened. Zero turned, startled, to see Talon standing there, his pale eyes studying the two of them. There was a moment of silence, and Zero immediately felt the tension rise. "Talon," Zero said, her voice guarded. "What brings you here?" Talon's gaze shifted from Zero to Marcus, his expression cold and clinical. "I've come to collect the results of the latest scans. We need to understand the extent of the changes more thoroughly." Zero looked at Marcus, then back at Talon. There was something about the way Talon had spoken that didn't sit well with her. His tone was professional, but there was an underlying edge to it, as though he viewed Marcus's transformation as a problem, not a breakthrough. "How are the scans looking?" Zero asked, trying to hide the unease in her voice. Talon didn't respond right away. Instead, he stepped into the room, moving toward the console where the data was stored. "The data is troubling," he finally said. "The compound has done something we didn't anticipate. These changes may not be reversible, Zero. We need to stop this now, before it gets any worse." Zero's heart sank. She knew Talon had never been fond of experimenting on humans, but hearing him say it out loud made the situation feel all the more real. Marcus was changing, and no one, not even Zira, knew what that would mean for the future. Marcus's voice broke the silence. "What happens if the changes can't be reversed?" he asked, his tone soft but filled with fear. Talon looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "We'll have to reassess our options. But for now, we need to stop the spread of the substance. We cannot allow this to continue." Zira felt a pang of guilt. She wasn't ready to let Marcus go through this alone. But she also knew Talon was right. There were too many unknowns, too many risks. The next steps they took could change everything. "We'll figure this out," Zira said, her voice steady, despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. She glanced at Marcus, offering him a reassuring smile, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. The hum of the ship was quieter than usual, and Zira found herself pacing the small, sterile corridor outside Marcus's room. She hadn't been able to shake off the conversation with Talon. The implications of Marcus's transformation were far more dangerous than anyone had expected. But despite the growing fear, something inside Zira refused to give up. She couldn't just stand by and let the answers slip away. She paused at a control panel, pressing a few keys to check the latest scan results. The data blinked on the screen, confirming her worst fears. Marcus's body was still changing, his cells reorganizing in a way no one had anticipated. His strength had grown to unprecedented levels, but it wasn't just physical. His neural activity was off the charts. His brain had been rewired, growing in ways that were still impossible to fully comprehend. But the changes had gone far beyond healing, far beyond enhancement. She glanced over at the small vial of the mysterious substance that had started it all. The researchers had assured everyone that it would be harmless, just a new way to speed up recovery. Yet in Marcus's case, the compound had done something different. Something ... unexpected. The results were not just abnormal. They were revolutionary, and possibly dangerous. Zira's hand hovered over the vial for a moment, the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. She had to get answers. There was no way she could let this situation spiral out of control. But before she could make a decision, the door to the control room slid open. Zira turned to find Marcus standing there, his figure framed by the doorway. His eyes were more intense than ever, and the glow in his skin seemed to pulse with each breath he took. He looked almost ... alien. Yet, in that moment, he still felt so human to Zira. "Zira," he said, his voice softer than before. "I need to talk to you." Zira swallowed, trying to mask the fluttering in her chest. "Marcus, you shouldn't be out of your room." "You're still going through, I know," he interrupted, his gaze unwavering. "I just ... I can't stay locked in there anymore. I don't feel like myself. I need to understand what's happening to me, and I need your help." Zira hesitated. The last few days had been overwhelming for both of them. The changes in Marcus were happening so quickly that there wasn't time to think about anything else. And yet, as he stood before her now, she realized she couldn't turn away from him, not when he needed her the most. "Okay," she said, stepping toward him, "but we need to be careful. We don't know what these changes mean. I need to get more data, and I need to understand exactly what's happening before we do anything." Marcus nodded, though his expression was clouded with worry. "I don't know how much longer I can control this. Every time I close my eyes, I feel like I'm losing myself. It's like something else is taking over." Zira gently placed a hand on his arm, her touch as reassuring as she could make it. "We're in this together, Marcus. We'll figure it out. You're not alone." His eyes softened, and for a moment, the two of them just stood there in silence, connected by something deeper than just their shared situation. Zira's mind raced as she thought about the next steps. She could already feel the weight of the responsibility settling onto her shoulders. She had to help him. But the truth was, she didn't know if there was anything they could do to stop the changes now. We need to go to the lab, Zero said, pulling herself together. I have some ideas, but I need to analyze the compound further. We have to understand what it's doing to you on a molecular level. Marcus nodded. Lead the way. They walked side by side through the ship's long, empty hallways, the silence between them growing thicker. Zero couldn't help but notice the difference in Marcus now. His posture was straighter, more confident. But there was also something unsettling about the way he moved, something predatory. Almost too sure of himself. When they arrived at the lab, Zira immediately began working. She ran a few tests on the compound again, hoping for any new information that could explain what was happening to Marcus. But the more she studied the data, the more she realized that the substance was unlike anything she had encountered before. It wasn't just altering Marcus's cells. It was altering his very essence. Zira, Marcus said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. What's happening to me? Why is this happening? Zira paused, unsure of how to answer. She wanted to give him hope, but the truth was, she didn't know how to stop the transformation. She turned to face him, her expression serious. I think the substance is fusing with your DNA. It's changing you from the inside out. Your cells are adapting to it, evolving faster than we can keep up with. Your body, your mind. It's becoming something else, something stronger. Marcus's face paled slightly, but he didn't look away. Is there a way to stop it? Zira hesitated. She had to be honest with him. I don't know. Right now, it's impossible to predict what will happen. The changes could stop at any time, or they could keep growing. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear building inside him. So I'm just changing forever. Zero could see the uncertainty in his eyes, and for the first time since meeting him, she felt a deep sense of helplessness. She had always been able to fix things, always able to help others. But this was beyond her. This was something she couldn't control. I'm not giving up on you, Marcus, she said quietly. We'll figure it out, together. They spent hours in the lab, running tests, analyzing the data, and searching for any clue that could explain Marcus's transformation. Zero was exhausted, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't quite organize. The truth was, she was scared of what Marcus was becoming and scared of what it meant for humanity. If this transformation spread, if other humans experienced the same thing, the entire galaxy could be thrown into chaos. Finally, as the lab's artificial lights began to dim, Zero stepped away from the console. She glanced at Marcus, who was standing near the window, his gaze fixed on the stars outside. Marcus, she said softly, I need you to trust me. I'll keep searching, I promise. He turned to her, his violet eyes filled with determination. I trust you, Zira, but we need to act quickly. Whatever this is, it's only the beginning. Zira nodded, her resolve hardening. She had made a promise to him, and she wouldn't break it. No matter what it took, she would find the answers. And together, they would face whatever came next. The days had blurred together for Zira. The sterile white walls of the medical facility seemed to press in on her. Their coldness mirrored in the distance that had started to grow between herself and Marcus. She had worked tirelessly to find answers, poring over the scans, the compound, and the data. But each time she thought she had found a breakthrough, something new emerged. The changes in Marcus were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. She stood in front of the window in the observation room, staring out at the endless expanse of space. The stars glistened like distant, unreachable promises. How many times had she stared at them, lost in her thoughts? But now, as she looked out, the thought of the unknown seemed darker. It's more dangerous. The door behind her slid open, and she didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Marcus had a presence that filled the room even before he spoke. She felt him standing there, his body almost humming with the energy of the changes inside him. You've been quiet, he said softly. Zero turned to face him, her hand gripping the console in front of her. I've been trying to figure out the next steps, she said, her voice sounding tired even to herself. We've hit a dead end. Every test we run just leads to more questions. The compound has altered your DNA, Marcus, and we have no way of Reversing it, we don't even know if we should try. Marcus took a step closer, his eyes reflecting the worry she had seen in him before. But now there was something else, a determination. So, what happens now? I keep changing? Or do we try to stop it? Zira's heart ached at the question. She had no easy answer for him. No, the truth was, she didn't know what the right thing to do was anymore. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how little control they had over the situation. What if the changes were irreversible? What if Marcus became something so far removed from humanity that they couldn't call him human anymore? But then she thought of his eyes, those violet eyes that, despite everything, still held a glimmer of the man he used to be. Marcus was still in there, and he needed her. He needed someone to fight for him. I don't know, Zira said, shaking her head. I wish I did, but I think the more we try to reverse it, the more dangerous it might become. Marcus's expression darkened. The strain in his features clear. So, I just have to live with this. With these changes, I don't want to be this thing that I don't understand. Still feel human, but I don't look it. Zira felt a pang in her chest. She understood his fear. The changes were too much to handle. No one knew what the end result would be, and Marcus was struggling to hold on to himself. You are human, Marcus, Zira said, stepping forward and gently placing a hand on his arm. This is just a transformation, but you're still you. I know it. Maybe changing, but you're not lost. He met her gaze, his voice quiet but filled, with an intensity she had never heard before. But for how long? How long until I'm nothing but this? Zira swallowed, her throat tight. We don't know, but I won't let you face this alone. Marcus's eyes softened, his posture loosening slightly. I'm glad you're here, Zira. I don't think I could go through this without you. Zira felt a rush of warmth spread through her chest, but she quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for emotions. There were bigger things to consider now. I've been thinking, Zira said, her voice steadying as a plan began to form in her mind. Maybe we can't reverse the changes, but we can control them. We can figure out how to manage your new abilities. We just need more time. Time to understand what's happening on a deeper level. Marcus looked at her, still unsure but hopeful. Do you think we can do that? Control it? I think we have to try, Zira replied firmly. If we can't stop the changes, maybe we can adapt. We need to understand the full extent of what's happened. Maybe there's something in the compound's chemical structure we can use to stabilize the changes. But what if we can't stabilize them? Marcus asked, his voice filled with doubt. Zira hesitated, looking at him. Then we will find another way. We'll make sure you don't lose yourself in all of this. Marcus studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he nodded, though there was still uncertainty in his eyes. All right, I trust you. But if this goes wrong, if I start to change into something I can't control, you have to promise me something? Zira stepped closer, feeling the weight of his words. What is it? Promise me you'll stop me. If it gets too much, promise me you'll end it. Zira's breath caught in her throat. What? The weight of his request hit her hard. The thought of losing him, of ending his life before it truly began, was unbearable. But she couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. If things went too far, if the changes became uncontrollable, she might have no choice. I promise, she said softly, her voice unwavering. I will do whatever it takes to make sure you're safe. Marcus's face softened, and for a moment he seemed to relax. I'm ready to try. Let's figure this out together. Zira nodded. She had made up her mind. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about the future. If they could figure out how to manage this transformation, they could show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. They could prove that they weren't just a race to be ignored or underestimated. They were evolving, and if they could control it, they could become something greater than anyone had imagined. But Zira knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, risks, and perhaps even sacrifices. Yet, as long as they had each other, they could face whatever came. Next, let's get to work, Zira said, determination in her eyes. We have a lot to learn. The quiet hum of the ship seemed almost deafening as Zira stared at the data on the screen. Hours of research and testing had passed, and yet the mystery of Marcus's transformation was far from solved. The substance that had been injected into his system was still altering his DNA in ways no one could have predicted. But despite the uncertainty, a part of Zira felt a strange sense of hope. Marcus had been growing stronger, both physically and mentally, but the changes weren't without their risks. His body had adapted, evolving into something more powerful than it had ever been. His muscles were now more defined, his senses heightened. But it wasn't just his body that was changing. His mind was becoming sharper, more focused. It was as though the transformation was opening up new abilities. But there was always a lingering fear that the changes could go too far. Zira rubbed her eyes, the exhaustion from the constant work weighing heavily on her. But she couldn't afford to stop. Not now, Zira, a voice called from behind her. She turned to see Marcus entering the room, his confident stride echoing through the empty hall. His eyes still glowed faintly, but there was a sense of calm about him now. His transformation, though overwhelming, seemed to have brought him a new understanding of himself. "Marcus," she said, straightening up, "how are you feeling today?" He smiled, though there was a seriousness in his gaze. "I feel better than I've ever felt, actually. The changes. They're becoming more natural now. I can control them. Mostly." He hesitated. "I think I'm starting to understand what's happening to me." Zira looked at him closely. The changes in Marcus were remarkable. He was no longer the confused man who had been overwhelmed by the rapid transformation. He was stronger, more confident, and his presence was undeniable. But Zira knew they still didn't fully understand what the long-term effects would be. She was still afraid of what might happen if things went too far. "I'm glad you're adjusting," Zira said quietly. "But we still don't know everything about the compound, what it's done to you, ... It's not just physical, it's more than that. Your mind, your emotions, even your instincts have changed." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know. I don't feel like I'm losing myself. I'm not becoming someone else. I'm just ... becoming more. I'm still me, Zira, just ... enhanced." Zira took a deep breath, trying to steady the emotions swirling inside her. She had been so focused on the changes in Marcus that she hadn't given herself the time to think about what this all meant for them. She had seen the potential for Marcus to become something greater than he had ever been, but she had also seen the dangers, the unknowns. "We still don't have answers," Zira said, her voice soft but firm. "We don't know what will happen if the changes continue, Marcus. I don't know if you'll be able to keep control. What if you lose yourself? What if you can't come back?" Marcus stepped closer to her, his eyes filled with a mix of understanding and determination. "I get it, Zira. You're scared, but I'm not the same person I was. I can feel it. I'm not asking you to trust the changes. I'm asking you to trust me." Zira swallowed hard. "I want to trust you, but I also want to protect you. I want to help you, but I'm afraid of what happens next." Marcus reached out, placing his hand on hers. "Then help me figure it out. I know I can't do this alone. You're the only one who understands me right now. You're the only one who sees me for who I am, not what I'm becoming." The sincerity in his voice took Zira by surprise. She had been so focused on the science, the data, the endless questions that she hadn't realized how much Marcus had come to rely on her. He wasn't just a patient anymore. He was a partner, someone she needed just as much as he needed her. "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly. "We'll face this together. Whatever happens, I'll be here." Marcus smiled, and for the first time since the transformation had begun, there was a peace in his eyes. "I'm ready, Zira. I know what we're up against. But we can do this. We'll figure out how to control it, how to live with it. I don't need to go back to what I was. I just need to find a new path forward." Zira nodded, a sense of calm washing over her. The fear was still there, lurking in the back of her mind, but it wasn't as strong now. She couldn't control the future, but she could help guide Marcus through the unknown. She could be the steady hand he needed to help him navigate the changes. "All right," Zira said, her voice firm with newfound resolve. "We'll start the tests again. We'll find a way to control the changes, but we need more data. We need to understand how your body is adapting on a molecular level. You have to make sure that you don't lose yourself in this. Marcus nodded. I trust you, Zira. Let's do this. The next few days were a blur of tests, analysis, and careful observation. Zira pushed herself harder than she ever had before, diving into every piece of data, every result, with the same determination she had always carried. But this time it wasn't just about science. It was about Marcus and the future that was. Waiting for him, they discovered more about the compound, its properties. How it interacted with human cells, how it affected the brain. Zira had thought that the changes were irreversible, but the more they tested, the more she realized that they might be able to control the process. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. With each new discovery, Marcus grew stronger, more confident in his ability to manage the changes. But even so, there was always a part of Zira that worried. What would the future hold for him? Would he still be the person she cared for, or would he become someone else entirely? But as she watched him working alongside her, as he helped her understand the data and offered his own insights, Zira knew that they were both changing. They were both evolving in ways neither of them could have imagined. And no matter where this path led, Zira was ready to walk it with him.